Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Our third panel is sponsored by Anomaly 6 and Momentous. It will cover functional gear that optimizes readiness and protection. Panelists are Luke Buckingham and Gabby Franco, and our moderator is Catherine Basso.
Good afternoon. Hope everyone had a good lunch, and if you feel tired, there's coffee still in the back. My name is Catherine Basso. I'm a Marine veteran. In 2017, I got out of the Marine Corps in order to create a women's tactical line. This was born out of necessity, sadly, because when I was in, the supply officer told me that they could not give me anything that didn't exist. So here we are, creating a line specifically for women, made for women and by women. And I'm ecstatic to have these amazing people from our industry and the industry of the tactical world here to talk about challenges, issues, and ways forward to ensure that all women have what they need to excel and they're given an MOS. So Luke, if you'd introduce yourself first.
Sure. Hi, I'm Luke Buckingham. I'm the Director of Operations at Mystery Ranch Backpacks. I've been building packs for a little over 20 years, and thanks to the Valkyrie Project for putting this on, and Catherine for inviting me to the panel.
Well, I'm Gabby Franco. I'm an Olympian, and I shoot competitively for Walther Arms, and I've been doing so for almost 5 years, and very happy to be here with you today.
All right, so to set the tone, the last couple of panels we've been talking a lot about training. This panel we're going to talk about equipping. So as you all know, leaders are required to train and equip their service members. Equipping is a huge part of that because as women, we have special requirements to ensure that our clothes, our gear, and all of our apparel fits us correctly. Unfortunately, the majority of women, probably still in this room too, are being issued men's uniforms, men's packs, men's boots, men's body armor, and men's helmets. So how do we discuss a way forward to ensure that women have exactly what they need so that they are not a liability on the X, but rather the asset that they are? And if we're talking about optimizing performance, how much faster could a woman be if she was on a 10K ruck march and not having to hold her straps together when she does it? How much more accurate? Thank you. How much more accurate could she be if the butt of the rifle actually sat comfortably on her shoulder instead of slipping down past her plate carrier onto her bicep, right? This is what we're talking about when we're talking about optimizing performance. If we are already asking women to meet and exceed standards and then handicapping them before they even cross the start line, how can we expect them to push through and make it to these soft levels, make it to infantry, make it to all these male combat arms MOSs? We have to start from the beginning and the very basic requirement of equipping properly. So with that, the first question, and we'll start with Luke here. One of the most common responses I get when I'm explaining this problem set to decision makers and leaders is it's not just women, men are uncomfortable too. But this isn't about discomfort. What are the consequences of service members using gear that doesn't fit?
Sure. So we've been building packs for a long time. Our business was founded by a very petite 5-foot tall woman and a very large 6'4" man. And so one of our priorities has always been, you got to be able to fit. If you can fit Renee and Dana, you're probably in the range of outcomes that you need. What we've seen in the years of manufacturing gear for the military is there's this idea of you have to fit the 5th to the 95th percentile. And unfortunately, that is a lot of language in contracting documents that doesn't really end up being implemented effectively. And the consequences are significant. It's not just about performance optimization, although that is really important. It's also about injury prevention. We've seen a lot of service members with scars from their packs. It's a really common occurrence. We've seen, especially in the years of service members coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan, there's permanent nerve damage, inability to feel from pack straps that are falling off of plate carriers and resting in the armpit and damaging that nerve bundle over, miles and miles of rucking with obscene large amounts of weight on. So having properly fitted equipment isn't, to your point, it's not just about comfort. It's about having somebody who is not only able to perform their best on the mission today, but who is going to be cared for in a way that they can continue to perform tomorrow and next year, and when they leave the service as well.
So to that point, the acute and long-term injuries with improper gear. So I'm sure you know a lot of women, and probably women in this room, are getting out of the military with shoulder injuries, neck injuries, hip injuries, knee injuries. You guys can stop me when you're ready. We're seeing just so many injuries occur because of gear that's not fitting, or injuries sustained, fill in the blank, and a lot of that is due to training. The number one cause of injuries in training and overseas is due to improper PPE. When you said the 5th and 95th percentile, it reminded me of some research I did. The 5th percentile of men is 5'5". The 5th percentile of women is 5 feet. And so unless you have specific language requiring vendors to create gear for the 5th percentile of women, you're going to be getting a lot of gear that fits that 5'5" to, I believe, 6'2". So imagine the problem if you are a woman in this room right now or online that are 5 feet to 5'5", and you wonder why you have injuries. Is the gear literally was not built to include you. Gabby, lethality, let's talk about that. In terms of Walther and their pistol, could you actually explain what Walther did? We'll start there.
Well, I think the first thing we're going to start is saying that one of the biggest challenge that we have new shooters, but particular women, which is consistent, is the lack of maintaining the same grip on the gun. Okay, they constantly readjust their grip after one round or a couple of rounds. So they are constantly shooting, and the gun feels like it's slipping out of their hands. And that is very, very common. And when you think about that and you sit back, and how can you talk about lethality when you don't have that confidence that you can put 2 or 3 rounds to stop that threat, neutralize that threat, and for you to your survivability too. So it's a big issue in that aspect. And so what Walther did is that they created this firearm that it fits much better for small to medium-sized hands without compromising what it is a full-size handgun. Okay, when in the firearms industry, when you talk about a gun for a woman, most people think, oh, it's a pink, it's a purple, it's a single stack. Now you're giving me a single stack 7-round gun when I really want capacity. I want 17-round magazine, right? And so what they did, that reduced the grip on the gun, they shorted the trigger bar to bring that trigger back. And so now you have a better grip around, but you can also have a better reach. And why is this so important? Not because women cannot shoot any other gun. I used to shoot 2011s, 40 caliber, right, in competition. And you think, well, you have small hands, how do you used to shoot that? Well, I can do stuff that is not afforded for law enforcement women or military, because I can put thumb rest, I can change the recoil spring, I can change the recoil system on my pistol, I reload, I make my own ammo, with lower power factor. But can you do that? You cannot. Right? And so you are relying on this firearm who is set up for these individuals or is a full-size handgun that does not serve you very well for what you're supposed to. So when we talk about lethality, right, you're looking for a firearm that you feel comfortable and confident to shoot with it. Because we know that you grab the gun, and when you're at the range, you shoot 1 or 2 rounds. We're like, oh, okay, feels good. But deep inside, you know that, oh, will I be able to really shoot 5, 10 rounds in a row? Moreover, if I can go. Moreover, when you shoot, like I shoot my pistol, and one of the biggest issues I have with large frame guns is that I could shoot that firearm in a dry environment, no problem. No big deal. Start raining, and that gun start dancing between my hands, okay? And there's nothing you can put on your hands to make it dry. But with a firearm, with the new PDP, Walther PDP F series, which is smaller grip, I can shoot that gun whether it's dry or rain. Will that give you more confidence to shoot that gun? Will it give you that confidence? You say, okay, I can shoot that, I can protect myself, can defend myself. Is that better? So, yeah.
So for the military across the board, and this is approximate and rough, we make about 15% of your customer base. From a business perspective, I understand why companies spend all their RDT&E on 85% of the customer base. From Walther Arms, though, females and women only make up 10% of your customer base. Yet you still created a female-specific pistol. Can you provide us insight into the thought process behind that decision?
Well, first you have to understand who Walther Arms is, and this is a company who created the first blowback gun in 1908. Also, they created the first style concealed carry gun that you see on the 007, right? And so they are not afraid to innovate. But also, when we talk about statistics, and we always talk about 10% and 15%, it sounds like a low number, but if you look at that number as today, that's how it looks like. But if you look back and you say, how was it 5 years ago? Was it 5%? Now that 15% doesn't look that bad, or that 10% doesn't look that bad. You see a trend. And now in society, women are changing. Women are getting more into military. Women are getting more into law enforcement. They are concealed carrying more. They know that they can defend themselves, they can defend their children. So Walther Arms, what they saw was an opportunity. I was giving a class in female troopers. I'm also a firearms instructor. And I saw these women putting their heart and soul to shoot their best with this huge gun. And I was doing my best to help them, but at the end of the day, I knew that the tool that they were using was handicapping them, okay? And that's when I went to Walther and I said, how is it possible that we don't have a firearm designed for women or for people with small and medium hand size? And I kind of ranted, probably, but I thought for a little while that ended up in deaf ears because I didn't hear anything else from them. A few months back later, they called me and said, Gabby, sign this NDA. I'm like, okay, you got my attention. And they flew me to Arkansas to their factory and they showed me the first prototype. And I was like, this is what we're talking about. Now, many women now, law enforcement, many police departments, for instance, they're able to use their own guns, their preference guns, and now they're shooting that firearm that's also use the same magazine as the other Walther pistols. So they didn't compromise anything. They improve their customer base. And if I say something very important, it's because Walther believe that it's their duty to provide a product that is ready for anything. They believe it's their duty because they know myself as a concealed carry, as a gun owner, it's my duty to be trained and be ready for anything. And so I think it's to your point, when you have these companies, they have to say, okay, this is my base, right? But this percentage is also valuable. They also matter, and they need the right equipment to be effective and to, in this case, when we talk of firearms, so they can protect their lives and also the people around them.
Absolutely. Luke, there are 46,000.
Can I jump in on that idea as well?
Yeah.
As we've started as we've grown as an organization and had better access to market research and getting a better understanding of who our customers are, we saw a few years ago that women made up about 15% of our customer base. Well, women make up more than 15% of the population. And so we saw that as a challenge. What can we do to grow that number? Because women are out there doing all of the same things. So if only 15% of our customers are women, that tells me that we have some room to improve our offering, and we've done that. We've seen that number come steadily up year over year. It's one of our key performance metrics as an organization now. So it can be done.
So along those lines, 46,000 firefighters in the United States, even less so in wildfire. And your wildfire packs are specifically harnessed with a female fit. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah. So we did a pretty comprehensive fit study, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, where we looked at 250 different models, body models, across men and women, all different body types. And what we wanted to see was, because our packs have always had some adjustability in them, as I said, that's kind of one of the ideas we were founded on, but we wanted to see where we could continue to move the needle a little bit. And the obvious initial place to start to implement that was in the outdoor market, where there's a big push for women-specific equipment. But that's just a small piece of our pie. And what we started to realize was that there was an opportunity there in the ability to cant the waist belts to fit hips differently, and to contour the shoulder straps, to, especially when the customer is wearing this pack for maybe the majority of a 16-hour shift, carrying, 60 plus pounds. There's chafe points, and there's, the ability to actually fit that form factor more effectively dramatically improves the user experience and, reduces injury. So as soon as we started to see the range of improvement that we could get by making some female-specific harnessing, we've worked to apply that across all of our product lines, and we've heard a lot of appreciation from female firefighters in particular. It's one thing to go on a few-hour hike or whatever with a granola bar and some water, but when you've got a pack on, all day, it's a different beast.
So along the lines of that requirement, whenever I talk about female-specific gear and apparel to others in this industry, besides, honestly, you two, I'm told there's no requirement from the military. Yet when I talk to the boots-on-the-ground women out there, they're screaming for female-specific apparel, boots, packs, gear, kit, body armor, helmets, etc. From the industry perspective, what is needed to develop female-specific kit?
The technology exists. A requirement is needed, because it's not the commercial markets where the end user gets to make a purchasing decision. This kit is issued, right? And maybe you can get away with a little bit of your own kit, but generally not. You have to use what's issued. So even the 5th to 95th percentile thing, it's one thing to have a requirement, but beyond that, what I would like to see would be then a T&E process that's designed to validate that claim. I can tell you, yeah, my spear issue pack it'll fit the 5th to 95th percentile. Do you think they tested it on the 5th to 95th percentile? I bet they didn't. So the first thing would be a requirement. Like I said, the technology's there, the capability is there. That's the biggest difference between the firefighting customer and the military customer for us, is that the firefighting customer is in large part able to make their own purchasing decision. So it's still government funds paying for it. It goes into a cache, and it might get reissued to somebody else next season. But they get to choose that, and they can get it fit properly because they have that decision. So a requirement from government, and then a T&E program that actually validates those claims once they're made.
So you're saying T&E, are you speaking like certain females, if we're talking just the specific female line of different body shapes and sizes, or what? Can you go a little bit more into the T&E that you'd like to see?
Sure. I think, so a lot of, for PACs anyway, and I can't really speak to much outside of that. For PAC T&E, either the equipment is often for carrying specific equipment or under specific circumstances. And these contracting documents are written really specifically to call out, temperature ranges that it needs to operate effectively within and material specs. And those are easy things to test, right? You can put it in the cold lab, you can make sure the buckles don't break. But in terms of capability of the warfighter who has to use the equipment, a 20-minute ruck march or even a 2-hour ruck march on a handful of folks who just happen to be around, that's not a study. That's not giving you good information. That's giving you anecdotal information, and it's pretty subjective. It feels good. Great. So training is another component that should be mentioned. You train with your pistol, you train with your weapon, you should train with your pack. So I think especially when large contracts are getting determined, Marine Corps pack system, Molly for the Army, you need to validate that this is actually going to function well for the full range of users that are going to end up getting issued that kit.
Can I say something about the training? So training, as we know, is very, very important. And some of you, you have your job in the military. Many of you, your hobby is, spend hours at the gym. Mine is doing dry firing and going to the gun range. That's what I do, right? And I train a lot. And like I said before, I used to shoot, large frame guns before I started shooting the PDPF series. But like I said, and I want to reiterate into that, every time I felt rain coming down the sky, my confidence went down. And so while training is good, it's important, having confidence on the equipment and that you can handle that equipment effectively is what runs everything and put it all together. Otherwise, you can have all the training, but you know where you're going to fall. You know where the flaw is, and when that moment comes, you're just going to go downhill.
There's actually a study that said ill-fitting gear created cognitive dysfunction. And I'm sure you all know that too. If you're on the X and you're fiddling with your gear, all of a sudden you're distracted and you're not focused on what you need to do.
Know, you deep inside know what you can and what you cannot do, what you can control and what you cannot control.
Yeah. It's all very interesting. Okay. Moving on, data points drive innovation, along these lines. Research creates data points. So from your perspective, what research gaps still exist that need to be filled specifically for women in the military?
We actually worked with the Human Performance Lab at Montana State University in 2010, 2012, to start a study looking at the performance improvement of properly fitted packs, specifically over body armor was the issue we were looking at. Because, if you've got a 100-pound pack on and body armor is curved, and if the body panel of the pack is flat and it's flopping back and forth, we were trying to look and see how much energy is actually wasted. Is there a measurable effect in VO2 max performance, in lactic acid buildup? And I think also, what you mentioned about mental acuity, if you're focused on not rocking this thing back and forth on your body, if it's locked on and fitting properly, that there was some promising data that came out of that, but we didn't have the ability to continue that research. So I think there is a huge opportunity, and again, I think that type of research could then become a part of a T&E protocol for evaluating new kit. But I think there's definitely correlation out there, and I think if we could do a little bit more research, we could show causation between ill-fitted gear and performance optimization.
I think that's one of the greatest challenges, especially as I'm going around briefing decision makers on cadre and on the challenge here. a lot of what we have is anecdotal. A lot of what we have is, I have a friend, or I suffered this, or I had hip surgery at 35 as soon as I got out of the military because my hip was really jacked up since 2006. But these are all anecdotal. And I know that they're working right now to gather data for injuries specifically. But we need to expand this research to ensure that when I'm sitting up front and I'm saying, we need female-specific packs so that we can reduce neck injuries, or we need female-last shoes because we're still getting issued men's boots, and we are not smaller feet. We are shaped and sized differently, and we are getting knee injuries and hip injuries because we're wearing men's boots. That we need to be able to look at that and point to the research that has been done and will be done to motivate these leaders to actually make the right decision. So in the past, we've learned that investigations, most gear is tested and evaluated for the male form. So I'm not sure if anyone heard about this, but we learned that seatbelts were created for the male form, and thus disproportionately women are dying or having more injuries in car wrecks because that seatbelt was not created for them. How does female shape change and alter impact gear? And what should we do? What should leaders do when they're creating requirements to lead the industry into creating the right gear? Because what I don't want to happen, and I don't want any of these women and the next generation to come from us, is contracting agent goes out to their normal vendors and says, we need something female specific. And that vendor doesn't know what that means, so they just shrink it and pink it, and thank God they can't have pink camouflage in the military. But they shrink it and pink it, right? So we need to be very specific, and the leaders need to be very specific in guiding the industry on exactly what they need. So is there something that the military side can do for the commercial side to ensure that they direct them on the correct path?
It comes largely down to contracting requirements. The amount of specificity that's built into those documents is immense. And so all that needs to be done is the ask needs to be made, and industry in some cases will need to do some development work. I think what leaders in the military could be doing would be directing funding toward research. I think that would be a huge improvement, because I think it will show very quickly that there's value to be had there. But in terms of directing industry, that's the opportunity, is with the contracting documents and those requirements. And I think it would be lovely if it's female specific, but even if you just start considering the female form in the range of what you're already asking for, more specifically, the technology exists, and it just needs to be applied. And really, I think it's a matter of the ask being made.
I would say just, like in going to that point, is that recognizing that there's no one fit all, that they should have like at least brackets, those who fall into this bracket, that there's that percentile and so on and so forth, so we can serve better the service members to the fullest and help them become and achieve what they need to achieve and they want to do more effectively.
All right, last question, and then we're going to open it up. Thanks, Carlin. From an industry perspective, and I know you all started, Walther created their pistol, and Mystery Ranch created your harness, and I don't want you to have to speak for anyone else, but what is the biggest struggle creating female fit gear?
I would say it's just the stigma. It seems like if it's for women, men cannot use it, for example. And I think that's a huge loss of opportunity for many companies because, like in the firearms industry, we have this PDP-F series, and men have come to me, why did you guys call it F series? I love this gun. I'm like, okay, just put that ego down and just shoot it and have fun with it. You know what I mean? So I think that's one of the biggest thing, the stigma or the industry that is such a small percentage of users without looking at the big picture and all the potential out there. And more importantly to me is that if I'm a firearms owner, I want to have the best so I can do with that firearm defend myself more effectively. And that would be the same for law enforcement, for military. And I think we ought to them as manufacturers to provide that to those customers.
Inventory management. It sounds boring, but honestly, it's if you have a female-specific pack model and a men's model of the same thing, you got to carry twice as much inventory potentially. And we've seen, I think we've seen less than we would like in terms of uptake in our wholesale to retail relationships and things like that. But it's a consideration. It costs more money, it requires more storage, and it requires a little bit of effort. And especially when you're talking about issued kit, managing that inventory is work. And so I don't want to pretend that it's not. But I think a good example is we hold some packs on the Spear contract for SOCOM. The last version of the contract, they purchased 3 different sizes of shoulder harness and 3 different sizes of waist belt. And the idea is it's modular harnessing, so it's the exact same dimensions and features on the bag, but you can customize the harnessing to fit a broader range of people. Well, that inventory management was an annoyance to someone. And on the new contract, it's one size fits most. And I get it, that's, you take the one pack out and you issue it out and then you get it back, and if it's still functional, you issue it out to the next person. You don't have to worry about, well, golly, where are my 16 to 18 inch length shoulder harnesses? So it's a real thing. It takes more work, it takes more effort. And again, I think that's where if we can start showing the value of it, I think that's a strong value proposition. So that's one of the big challenges.
I'm trying to filter my thought right when he said that. We can start taking some questions so that...
Hi, I work in kit and equipment for soldiers in the UK, so totally in my element here. Gabby, you were talking about the difficulties faced when holding a pistol for women. Are there anything you've seen when it comes to assault rifles? What are the biggest challenges getting a comfortable fit for an assault rifle for a female soldier?
Well, like everything when you talk about like AR-15 would be having a good collapsible stock that, you can have collapsible stock that can be adjusted to the arm length of the shooter. But other than that, I can shoot the rifle comfortably. Perhaps being able to adjust the optic. I don't know if in military you're able to do that on your own optic, so you have a good relief. Or you have to shoot whatever they put you and you cannot adjust it. That I cannot, because I'm not in the military world. I don't know what you can or cannot do, but that would be the few things I would say that are the biggest issue.
On a side note, our UK friends, you have it written to have female-specific cut in your policies. The US does not. And if we want to talk numbers, roughly speaking, through active duty, reserve, and National Guard, we have about 385,000 women in the United States military. That is more than the entire UK military. Yet their policy has female-specific cut. Next question.
Is there an absolute minimum size of the hand grip and backstrap beyond which it is not possible to slim down? And what percentage of females are disadvantaged? I don't know if this is in regards to the backpack or handguns, but is there an absolute minimum size of the hand grip and backstrap beyond which it is not possible to slim down? And what percentage of females are disadvantaged? It's a bit of a two-part question.
Yeah, it's a little bit too broad. As long as for a handgun, there's not necessarily a minimum size. It all depends, though. More what is going to dictate the size of the grip is the magazine capacity. Okay, you have a double stack magazine, definitely there's going to be a limitation. You know, the magazine have to go there in not compromising the strength of the grip. Okay. However, for instance, like at Walther, what they did with the PDPF series, they not only reduced the grip without compromising that. So I would say the minimum size of the grip would be the minimum size of how big is the magazine that allows you to work your grip around that. When it comes to women, disadvantage in the different firearms, like I say, shooting a firearm is not necessarily the big deal. Like I said earlier, I shoot 2011s. Reaching the gun is not a problem. I'll compromise, right, to reach a trigger, which means, for those of you who know, would be like moving my hand this way so I can reach a trigger. So shooting the gun is not a problem. The biggest issue is your support hand. So with a large frame handgun, which I show for a long time, right? My grip will be like this, okay? With a firearm like the PDPF series, which I still can shoot at 22 rounds in the magazine, my grip is like this. So this grip with my support hand is not necessarily a shooting hand that is the issue. It's the support hand that prevents me from losing the grip of the gun, shooting multiple rounds, improving my accuracy, improving the effectiveness of me controlling the gun over and over and over. So yes, when it comes to other larger handguns, then you have disadvantage on people who have smaller hands, even medium-sized hands.
Yeah, there is a minimum size where you have to maybe change some of the other components to make it work. I was having a conversation with a person just before coming up here, and she has one of our packs, and the overall frame is too large. And so even though the shoulder harness can be adjusted to make it smaller, the form factor of the frame itself is overly large for her body type. So in terms of consistency of the kit that's getting issued, there is an outside where beyond a certain range you would need something that is not identical, whereas on a lot of our stuff, you can swap out the harnessing and the functional components of the bag are identical. There is a certain point at which you would need to potentially adjust the form factor of the pack itself.
I think to go back to what Luke said earlier, as well as you, Catherine, you mentioned there are some studies, or in some cases there are lack of studies. So I think for the audience, either in the room or online, where do they find the right outlet to identify where that study is, or to find the appropriate voice within their position, within their career field, military or other, to provide the data sets that the markets are clearly missing?
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the reasons that we're having this symposium right now, is to get the right people in the room. So the right military leaders, the right boots on the ground women, the right people in academia. I think that's where we start, because we're disjointed right now. And the more that I learn, the more that I get introduced to these amazing people in this room, the more I realize that we are creating these little pockets of information, but we're not coming together. Academia, all the research paper that gets published, but who has access to all of them? Where do we look? What military leaders are going to be the ones to say, hey, we're going to put you in charge of this and we're going to figure it out? For the industry side, we can ask for funding. There are grants everywhere, but who's going to point us in the right direction of what specific grant? So I think we have a lot of potential, especially in this room, to come together. And I think with the WITs that are going along with each of the services, they're great, but they need to make sure that they're talking to one another. So I think this problem set is complex, but it's easily solvable if we just communicate better. And I know we're great at communicating. So I think it's going to take a lot of effort on everyone's part. But I mean, if we've got academic, if we have Lincoln Labs, if we have MIT in this room right now, and we've got women with boots on the ground right now, like we can sit down over some coffee and cookies and at least come up with a way forward.
There's millions and millions and millions of dollars of government money being spent on research every year. It's really just a matter of somebody saying, let's direct some of that money at a study to evaluate these different requirements. There's SBIR money out there. You know, one of the things that we bumped up against when we were doing the research with the Human Performance Lab at MSU was a perception that, well, if the backpack company is funding the study, then surely it's going to show that their backpack performs better. And so that's where I think government can step in and say, no, this is a priority for us. Let's allocate some of this funding and find the right outfits to perform these studies.
And maybe that's also civilian oversight too. You know, maybe that's where we ask those on the Hill to get involved to ensure that the women in this room have exactly what they need to succeed. And then that next generation doesn't have to suffer through shoulder injuries, hip injuries, back injuries, migraines, knee injuries, foot injuries.
A little bit of a technical question here. Which body parts are being described when we consider the 5th and 95th percentile? And for those individuals outside of the 5th and 95th percentile, what do we do with those 10% of people?
Height and weight for the 5th and 95th, which also brings in a really unique situation. So ignorant people erroneously assume that the shorter a woman gets, the narrower her shoulders and the smaller her breasts, which if you've met any woman, you know that's not necessarily the case. Literally. So I think one of the things that we need to look beyond is height and weight. You know, especially for women who fluctuate 5 to 10 pounds every month, height and weight isn't necessarily something that's going to be accurate all the time. Height, obviously, yes. But it is definitely other factors, and that's why I always say this is a very complex problem. You know, you can't just take waist and inseam and create a pair of pants, right? For us, you know, when we did cadre pants, we have 72 different sizes, and it's an inventory nightmare. But we enable women to create and find a pair of pants that fits them, that outside of that industry standard and outside of that height and weight standard as well. So I think one of the challenges that we're going to run into is, yes, 5th and 95th percentile is height and weight, but we need to go beyond that. And it's a research gap as well. We need to figure out how to predict the height and weight fluctuations, or at least the weight fluctuations that women have as they're going through their menstrual cycle, and account for those weight fluctuations and those curves as we see women who are different shaped than industry standard, which, by the way, industry standard is 9 to 10 inches between your waist and your hips. So if you're like, man, my pants don't fit, it's because who is actually 9 to 10 inches between their waist and their hips?
All right, so you mentioned at the beginning that if we're holding down like our straps, we're not running as fast, like all these things, like how could we actually, you know, optimize our performance if our gear fit us correctly? I think that especially in all the roles that the women maybe even represented here today have had to just go along to get along anyways, and we don't want to be the squeaky wheel because we want to just do the work and to make it make it through those, just make it to the unit so that we can go and participate. And then while we're there, more than likely, we're continuing to just go along to get along and using what's available. One, maybe it could be from the fact that we don't know that the information or that the technology is out there, which you've already mentioned. The tech is there, the research is there. So what can industry be doing to highlight to women, not just in the military, but to the rest of law enforcement and everyone else, that this stuff is available? And maybe you don't have it on your shelf because it doesn't make sense to have it in inventory because there isn't a demand yet, but making that known so that it can be used and the demand signal can be sent up, not just from the user, but then the leadership as well that knows it's there.
Yeah, I would say the first thing is women not settling themselves and always thinking that it can do something better. Not because, oh, I can do the same thing as the men. No, recognizing that we are different. There are differences. And I say that because, like I said before, I only shoot large handguns, and it took me to go to give this class to this female troopers, which were troopers on the whole sense of the word, to realize that there's a need. That because I could customize it here and there, I didn't see that need, but there is a huge need. And we can all, because of that day, now I benefit from it. You see? So I think that's what I would say.
I think there's a huge opportunity for industry to do a better job of marketing, informational marketing to let people know what's available. I think we can push our peers in our same industries to be better by being better ourselves. And yeah, I think there's a story there that, again, that whenever I hear about, oh, well, women are only 10% of our market or whatever, it's like, yeah, no, think about what you just said. They're 50% of the population. If they're only 10% of your market, that's a huge missed opportunity. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of room to kind of just continue to spread the word.
And again, to that point, the more women recognize those differences, they can look more instead of waiting for that information to come to them. Them have to be the researcher.
I think it's tough to, it's twofold. Yes, we all need to do better job marketing, which is not my favorite thing in the whole world. But it is hard stepping into a room and being the only or the first. It is tough. And it's tougher as well because you don't want to be that person raising your hand and saying, my shit doesn't fit. Especially because you're going to get do you know how to wear it correctly? So I think that it is twofold where we need to meet in the middle, where you have the leaders who are ready to stand up and say, this is my priority. And not just a priority, because I know that leaders have a ton of priorities, especially now in the new combat environment. It needs to be a top priority because you are equipping your service members. And it is a cultural thing, and I understand that. But if we can have leaders reaching, industry giving, then hopefully we'll meet somewhere in the middle and enable all of the women to be equipped.
The other piece there is we're spending a ton of money to equip these warfighters and train them. And, given the cost to make someone battle ready, why wouldn't we actually think about the ways in which the kit that we're putting on them could be a detriment to their readiness?
Readiness, retention, injury, manning. I mean, now we're talking high-level words that should be getting the attention of leaders, right? It's not just discomfort or I'm injured. It's, now all of a sudden you have to send, your women back. You have to send, this person back because she's injured. She's going to be out for 6 months because of ACL surgery. So it is a lot about retention and readiness and manning and injury prevention. It just makes us all a better force.
Here in the UK, I am asked in my job, what is the maximum weight someone should carry as a function of the user's weight? Does the panel have a view on the pack weight being defined by the user's weight, or does everyone carry the same amount of equipment with the lighter and smaller person at a disadvantage? P.S. Love the phrase, shrink it and pink it.
Unfortunately, there's often not really a choice to be made there. The equipment that needs to get carried is the equipment that needs to get carried. So, and I think that's one of the reasons that there is a push for the standardization of the issued kit, because in theory, we're all being expected to do the same job. So, we have some guidance on what we think is appropriate. Everything that we think is appropriate is exceeded by pretty much every military load that has to be carried, So, yeah, I think it would be nice if that were achievable, but at the end of the day, because that is unlikely to change, the specific goods that have to be packed and carried, that just reinforces the importance of making sure that the carriage system is designed to operate well with the user. And that includes things like, are they wearing body armor or not? Body armor changes the torso form factor massively. And so, again, I think there's opportunity to evaluate the actual use case and design better kit that considers those factors. Because unfortunately, I think the chances of lightening the load are very low.
So, indulge me in a curiosity question. I'm firmly of the belief that when we start thinking and being thoughtful about accommodations for women, we actually make things better for men as well, particularly those that fall outside the one size fits most phenomena. So in your study, this is for you, Luke, the 250 body types, do you find, or did you do any research on, is there more variation in a female body type, out of curiosity, than a male body type that allows the military to make this more efficiency argument for one size fits most for men that then is sort of upended by the inclusion of women? My only evidence for this is the fact that most women find, the way commercial gets around it is everything stretchy for women, which allows it to fit different body types better at the same size. Whereas, of course, military gear is not that, as we know.
Through that study, that fit study, there was a little bit more variation in the female form, specifically in the placement of, the different height of hip bone to lumbar. But it wasn't so significant that it couldn't be accommodated. I think we ended up using a series of 9 or 10 different measurements, looking at shoulder width, looking at distance from C6 to lumbar, looking at circumference of hips, circumference of chest. So there was a little bit more variation, but not anything so far outside of what we were measuring and experiencing on the male bodies that we measured that it, was problematic in any way.
Awesome. Thanks.
There is a lot of kit. Are there any priority pieces of kit for women which we should go after first? Buying, going through T&E, getting the inventory, etc., all at once will overwhelm the system.
Yes. My argument is the basics first, which is all of it. But helmets, right? We'll go straight from the top down. We need a lot more studies on helmets. We need to figure out if hair causes a decrease in protection down to the packs, because that'll cause injuries or reduce injuries, I should say. Down to the uniform, because nobody wants to drag 3 extra inches of crotch around when they're going over obstacle courses. Additionally, with the blouses, you're buying a blouse that fits your breasts instead of anything else on you. So if it's an XX large and you are 5'2", then all of a sudden your body armor is not going to fit the same. And you are walking around with a false sense of security. Body armor, my white whale, we need to do better. Like, we can do better. We need to do better. It is a billion-dollar industry. We just need to make that a priority. I don't think I need to say that to anyone here, but body armor is horrible for women. A C cup will push it out 3 inches. 3 inches. Boots, again, I think I've talked about this before, but our Q angle of our femur, because of our hip, our feet are shaped differently to distribute weight for women, and thus we need female boots. So all of it, but let's start with just the basics. And this is a basic requirement, and I cannot emphasize that enough. Like, this is 2023. Stop issuing us men stuff. It is a basic requirement.
Hi, I'm Georgia Grace Edwards. I'm a founder of She Fly Apparel. So we make pants with a patented zipper so women can pee outside without exposing skin to the elements or other people. And coming from the startup business world, it seems a bit antithetical to the military government world, where there's a lot more bureaucracy and it's a lot harder to innovate quickly. But I've been paying attention, and last year the Army announced that it was working on the first issued tactical sports bra. And so I'm curious about what is the market trend that's happening that's making the Army and the rest of the military pay attention to fitting women specifically for the first time? And then 2, as someone coming from the industry, how can we get our foot in the door to help provide our innovation to women who are in the military?
So I'll hit the first one. I think Luke can probably do the second one. The Army's doing a great job. They can, obviously, all the services can be faster. But, you know, the H bracket on their helmet, the women's cut on their body armor, the sports bra thing I'm interested about. I think that there are other focuses that they could have. But hey, it's progress, and we don't say anything bad about progress. You know, from a Marine perspective, like, it's just amazing to me how much ahead they are. Like, Marine Corps, right? We do more with less. Like, that's just what we do. And we just don't ever really get anything because we don't get any money. Navy takes it all. Candace, looking at you. So I do think that there's a lot of progress happening, and I'm super impressed with the direction that they're going in. And I do think that is a leadership thing. I think it's the women who are getting into these positions. I think it is the leaders who are understanding that, and the more exposure they have to women, the more they're realizing, you know, they need their own stuff. And then all these amazing women who are now into senior positions have the ability to make a difference, and they are making it a top priority. So I am really impressed with what the Army's done so far. I am excited to see what they are doing for the future, and you know, all the other services as well. Air Force, for sure. They're doing great things, and I look forward to ensuring, you know, that we keep them on their toes. One of the frustrating things from someone who's never been in the military is things change very quickly. You have a person in a position, 2 years later, they're gone. And the next person who's taking that position might not necessarily believe in everything that their predecessor did. So the hope is that we continue in an upward trajectory. We continue looking at all the gaps that we have and ensure that everyone can benefit from what one service is doing. And I think that goes back to making sure that we communicate, that all the WITs communicate. I was talking to an Air Force pilot the other day, and she was talking about the extended zipper in her flight suit. And a Navy pilot called her to ask her about it because she hadn't even heard of it. And that's what I'm talking about. We don't need our pilots dehydrating and losing the ability to handle G-forces because they're tactically dehydrating. So the more that we can talk, the more that we can have symposiums, the more that we can get on forums, the more that we can actually discuss all of this stuff, the better that we'll all be. And Mr. Wrench is way above me on sneaking into the military contracting world, so Luke might have a better answer.
Yeah, I mean, that's it's not straightforward. There's no obvious point of entry. The information that's available is confusing and hard to sift through. So I wish I had a better answer than that. I do think that, that government can pull industry. There's a lot of money being spent by government, and so that's attractive. So I think I think industry can push, and we try. But as you've encountered, it's not even clear where you should be pushing. So I think that's an opportunity where government can make the pull. Government can do a better job of informing industry of what opportunities are out there and what specific things they'd like to see developed, because a lot of stuff is getting designed and developed without government funding all the time. And if the needs are known and communicated, a lot of companies will make the investment in the development. Because again, if it's a need for government, it's probably a broader need even than that.